My mother-in-law demanded I give up my career because her son deserved a proper wife. I'd been pacing my home office for an hour, rehearsing the presentation that could change everything. 3 years of freelance work, late nights, and turning down social events to build my portfolio, all leading to this moment. The video call was scheduled for 2 p.m. with a publishing house that actually wanted to hear my ideas. My husband had promised to keep his mother occupied in the living room so I could have silence. What I didn't know was that while I was hyperventilating over my notes, she was sitting in my kitchen, sipping my expensive loose-leaf tea, and making plans to dismantle everything I'd worked for. The offer letter arrived 3 days later. I should have been celebrating. Instead, I was staring at a cancellation notice I never authorized. My signature perfectly replicated at the bottom, and a sinking feeling that my mother-in-law had just committed fraud in my name. Let me back up a bit, because I need you to understand the full picture before I tell you about the forgery. My name is Allison, and I've been married to my husband Nathan for just over 2 years. We met in graduate school, both of us pursuing very different paths. I was studying creative writing with a focus on children's literature, while Nathan was finishing his engineering degree. We bonded over our shared love of terrible puns, late-night coffee runs, and the mutual understanding that neither of us came from particularly functional families. Nathan's mother, Helen, had always been what I'd politely describe as intensely involved in her son's life. When we were dating, she called him every single night at 8 p.m. Not texted, called. And if he didn't answer, she'd call me. I remember the first time I picked up her call, naively thinking she might want to welcome me into the family. Instead, she spent 20 minutes asking about my prospects. "Your degree is in writing?" she'd asked, her voice carrying that particular blend of concern and condescension that I've since learned is her specialty. What exactly does one do with that? I'd explained patiently that I was a freelance content creator and aspiring children's book author. I'd already published a few short stories in literary magazines and was working on a middle-grade novel about a girl who could talk to animals. Helen had hummed in that non-committal way that told me she'd already dismissed everything I'd said. Well, that's nice, dear. For a hobby, that should have been my first warning, but Nathan was so wonderful, so kind and supportive of my work that I convinced myself his mother's behavior was just old-fashioned generational differences. She was a retired real estate agent who'd spent her entire career in a very traditional corporate environment. Of course, she wouldn't understand the creative industry. The first year of our marriage was blissful. We lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment that we decorated with mismatched furniture and an abundance of houseplants. Nathan would bring me tea while I worked late on my manuscript, and I'd cook elaborate dinners to celebrate his project deadlines. We were a team in every sense of the word, but Helen's visits became increasingly frequent. She'd show up unannounced on Saturday mornings with bags of groceries she insisted we needed, rearranging our refrigerator and complaining about our unhealthy eating habits. She'd comment on the dust on our bookshelves and the wrinkles in our curtains. Nothing was ever quite good enough for her son, and by extension, nothing I did was ever quite good enough either. I tried to be patient, really did. I'd smile through her criticisms and nod along when she gave unsolicited advice about how to organize our closet. I told myself she was just lonely, a widow of 15 years whose only child had flown the nest. She needed to feel useful. Needed to mother someone. What I didn't realize was that she'd already decided I needed to be mothered too, whether I wanted it or not. Everything came to a head during a Sunday dinner about 4 months ago. Nathan had just been promoted at his engineering firm, a senior position that came with a significant salary bump. We were celebrating with a home-cooked meal, a roast chicken with all the trimmings, my grandmother's recipe that I'd finally perfected. Helen arrived early, as usual, and immediately started poking around the kitchen. "Allison, you've used too much rosemary," she announced, lifting the lid off the roasting pan. Nathan doesn't like strong herbs. I bit my tongue, a habit I'd developed specifically for these interactions. Nathan has never complained about my rosemary before. "Well, he wouldn't, would he?" she said, giving me a look that somehow managed to be both pitying and sharp. "He's too polite to criticize your cooking." Nathan wandered into the kitchen just as I was about to respond, blessedly ignorant of the tension. He kissed my forehead and pulled a bottle of wine from the refrigerator. "Everything smells amazing, honey. Mom, did you see my promotion announcement? I emailed you the link." Helen immediately pivoted, her face transforming into a mask of maternal pride. "Oh, I saw it, sweetheart. I printed it out and showed it to everyone at the bridge club. My son, the senior engineer. Can you imagine? My little Nathan, all grown up." She turned to me, and there it was again, that look. "I suppose this means you'll be able to stop working soon, Allison. You won't need to do that little freelance thing anymore." I almost dropped the carving knife. "I'm sorry?" "Well, with Nathan making so much more money now, you can focus on being a proper wife. You know, take care of the home, keep things organized, maybe start a garden." That's what I did when my husband got his big promotion. It's what women are supposed to do. I stared at her, the knife suspended in midair. "I'm not going to quit my career, Helen. I've worked too hard to get where I am." She made a sound, a dismissive little click of her tongue. "Career? Allison, you write stories about talking animals. That's not a career. That's a distraction." The rest of the dinner was painfully awkward. Nathan tried to smooth things over, praising my work and talking about how proud he was of my upcoming projects. But the damage was done. Helen had shown her hand, and I'd seen the ugliness beneath the polite veneer. I thought that was the end of it. I thought she'd made her opinion clear and we could all move on. Agree to disagree. I was wrong. A few weeks later, I received an email from a publishing house I'd been courting for months. They were interested in my children's book concept, a series about a young girl who used storytelling to help other children deal with their fears. The editor, a wonderful woman named Rebecca, wanted to do a video call to discuss a potential contract. I was ecstatic. This wasn't just a freelance project or a short story in a small magazine. This was a legitimate publishing house with distribution, marketing, and real advances. This could be the break I'd been waiting for. I told Nathan immediately, and he was genuinely thrilled. This is huge, Allison. I knew they'd love your work, but I hesitated to tell Helen. Something in my gut warned me that she wouldn't share our enthusiasm. When Nathan mentioned it casually during a phone call, I heard her through the speaker. Her voice distant but clear. That's nice, dear. But you really need to be careful with those people. They're probably just trying to take advantage of her. Publishing is a very tough industry. I let it slide. I told myself she just didn't understand. The day of the video call arrived, Nathan had promised to take Helen out for lunch, keep her occupied while I had the house to myself. They were supposed to be gone for at least 2 hours. Plenty of time for my meeting and a quick celebration afterward. I set up my laptop on the dining room table, arranging my notes, a glass of water, and the small plant I'd bought for good luck. My heart was pounding with a mix of nerves and excitement. This was it. This was everything I'd been working toward. Nathan came in to wish me luck, wearing his going out shirt and that reassuring smile I'd fallen in love with. Mom will be here any minute. We're heading to that seafood place she likes. Call me as soon as you're done, okay? I want to know everything. I kissed him goodbye and settled in to wait. 10 minutes later, I heard the front door open. Helen's voice drifted in, sharp and querulous. I don't see why we have to go out today. I was going to make us a nice lunch at home. Nathan's response was too low for me to make out, but I heard Helen huff in annoyance. A moment later, she appeared in the dining room doorway, her coat half on, her purse clutched in one hand. She looked at my setup, the laptop, the notes, and something flickered across her face. I couldn't identify it at the time, but looking back, it was calculation. Working on something, dear? She asked, her voice artificially bright. I have a video call in about 10 minutes, I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. Nathan was just taking you out to give me some privacy. Privacy, she repeated, as if tasting the word. How thoughtful of him. Well, I won't keep you. She turned toward the door, and I allowed myself to breathe. That was the last I saw of her before my call. The meeting went beautifully. Rebecca loved my pitch, loved the sample chapters I'd sent, and offered me a contract on the spot. I was shaking when I hung up, tears streaming down my face. Everything I'd worked for was finally coming together. 3 days later, the official offer letter arrived in my inbox. I printed it out, my hands trembling with joy, planning to frame it. The advance was modest, typical for a debut author, but it was real. It was mine. I was about to sign it when my phone buzzed. A new email from the publishing house's legal department. I opened it with a frown. The message was polite but clear. They'd received a cancellation request for my offer, allegedly submitted by me. They'd processed it immediately, assuming I'd reconsidered. If there was any confusion, I should contact them right away. I stared at the screen, uncomprehending. I hadn't sent any cancellation request. I hadn't done anything of the sort. I scrolled down to find an attached document, the cancellation notice. My name was at the bottom, my signature, except it wasn't my signature. It was close. So close that I almost believed it myself, but I knew my own handwriting. I knew the way I formed my loops, the slant of my letters, the pressure of my pen. This was a forgery. And I knew, with a cold, gut-wrenching certainty, exactly who had done it. The phone felt like a brick in my hand as I stared at the cancellation notice. My vision tunneled, the edges of the kitchen table blurring into nothing. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I could do was replay every interaction with Helen over the past 2 years, searching for the moment I'd missed, the warning sign I'd overlooked. I must have sat there for 20 minutes before I heard Nathan's key in the lock. He came in carrying takeout bags, his face bright with anticipation. Hey, I brought Thai food. Figured we could celebrate your— He stopped mid-sentence, his smile faltering. Allison, what's wrong? You're white as a sheet. I couldn't speak. I just pointed at the laptop screen. Nathan set down the bags and crossed to the table, his brow furrowed with confusion. He leaned over my shoulder, reading the email from the legal department. I watched his expression shift from curiosity to bewilderment to dawning horror. What is this? He asked, his voice dropping. Why did they cancel the offer? Because someone sent them a cancellation request, I said, my voice flat and hollow. Someone who forged my signature? Nathan straightened up, shaking his head. That doesn't make any sense. Who would do that? Who would even have access to your paperwork? I looked at him then, really looked at him. His face was open, confused, completely genuine in his bewilderment. He had no idea. Of course he had no idea. He'd been at lunch with his mother, completely oblivious to what she'd been plotting. Your mother was here, I said slowly. Before you left for lunch, she was in the house alone for at least 10 minutes while I was setting up for my video call. My printed offer was on the desk. My signature was on it. She had time to copy it, Nathan. She had all the time she needed. Nathan's face went through a series of expressions, disbelief, denial, then a creeping realization that made him sink into the chair across from me. No, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. No, my mother wouldn't do something like that. She's difficult, I know, but she wouldn't commit fraud. That's insane, is it? I asked, and I hated how bitter my voice sounded. She told me I should quit my career. She called my work a distraction. She told me I should be a proper wife and take care of the home. She doesn't see me as a person, Nathan. She sees me as an obstacle between you and whatever fantasy she's built in her head. Nathan ran his hands through his hair, a nervous habit he'd had since we first started dating. Okay, let's not jump to conclusions. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe the publishing house got confused. Maybe someone else sent that request. Look at the signature, I said, turning the laptop toward him. Look at it carefully. He leaned in, studying the scanned document. I watched his face as he traced the loops with his eyes. He knew my handwriting. He'd seen it on grocery lists, anniversary cards, love notes I'd left on his pillow. He knew every curve and slant. It looks like your signature, he said hesitantly. It looks like my signature because someone practiced it. I snapped. Someone who had access to a sample and wanted it to pass as genuine. Tell me, Nathan, who else has been in this house alone in the past week? Who else had access to that desk? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. We both knew the truth. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. I could hear the clock ticking in the living room, each second a small hammer blow against my composure. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. I wanted to call Helen and demand an explanation, but I knew it would be pointless. She'd just deny everything and play the victim, the wounded mother being accused by her ungrateful daughter-in-law. I'm calling her, Nathan finally said, pulling out his phone. Don't, I said quickly. Not yet. I need to think. What do you mean, not yet? She sabotaged your career, Allison. She forged your signature. That's a crime. We have to confront her. I shook my head. A plan already forming in the back of my mind. If we confront her now, she'll deny it. She'll claim she was just trying to help, or she'll say she didn't understand what she was doing, or she'll turn it around and make it about how I'm overreacting. She'll gaslight us, Nathan. She's been doing it my entire marriage. Nathan looked torn, caught between his loyalty to me and his deep-seated reluctance to believe his mother was capable of something so malicious. I could see the internal battle playing out on his face, the same conflict that had been simmering beneath the surface of our relationship for years. Then what do you want to do? He asked quietly. I took a deep breath. I want to talk to the publishing house first. I need to explain what happened and see if they'll reconsider. If I can salvage this offer, then we can decide how to handle Helen. If I can't, I trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. If you can't, he prompted, then I'll have to decide whether I can stay married to a man whose mother is willing to destroy me to get what she wants. Nathan flinched as if I'd struck him. Allison, that's not fair. I didn't know she was going to do this. I had no idea. I know you didn't, I said. And I meant it. But that doesn't change the fact that she did it, Nathan. And she did it because she knew she'd never face consequences. Because you've never set real boundaries with her. Because every time she oversteps, you make excuses for her. She's just lonely. She means well. She doesn't understand. Well, she understands perfectly. She understands that she can do whatever she wants and you'll never stop her. Nathan opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. He looked defeated, slumped in his chair with his hands hanging limp between his knees. I felt a pang of guilt, but I pushed it down. I couldn't afford to soften now. This was too important. I'm going to call Rebecca at the publishing house, I said, standing up. I need to do this alone. Can you give me some space? He nodded wordlessly, gathering the Thai food bags and retreating to the living room. I watched him go, feeling a complex tangle of love and frustration and grief. I loved this man with my whole heart, but his mother was slowly poisoning everything we'd built together. I took my phone into the bedroom and closed the door. My hands were trembling as I dialed Rebecca's number. She answered on the second ring, her voice bright and professional. Allison, I was just about to call you. Did you get our offer letter? Yes, I said, my voice cracking. I got it. But I also got something else, a cancellation notice. Someone sent you a request to withdraw my offer and they forged my signature to do it. There was a beat of stunned silence on the other end. What? That's impossible. We wouldn't process a cancellation without verifying it with you directly. I know, I said, but someone submitted a request through your website's contact form. I have the confirmation email. It looks like it came from me. Rebecca's voice shifted from professional warmth to something sharper, more focused. Allison, I need you to send me everything you have. The cancellation notice, the confirmation email, anything else you've received. I'll get our legal team on this immediately. You believe me? I asked, the words coming out more desperate than I intended. Of course I believe you, she said firmly. You've been pursuing this opportunity for months. You wouldn't suddenly withdraw without any explanation. This is clearly some kind of fraud. Relief washed through me, so intense that I had to sit down on the edge of the bed. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you so much. Don't thank me yet, she said. We'll need to investigate. But I want to be clear. If this was fraud, and we can prove it, the offer is still on the table. We wanted you for this project. That hasn't changed. I ended the call feeling lighter than I had in hours, but the relief was tempered by a cold anger. Helen had tried to take this from me. She'd almost succeeded, and she would try again if I didn't stop her. I walked back into the living room to find Nathan pacing, his phone clutched in his hand. He looked up when he heard me, his expression wary and hopeful. What did she say? The offer is still on the table if we can prove the cancellation was fraudulent, I said. They're going to investigate. Nathan let out a breath he'd apparently been holding. That's good. That's really good. But it doesn't change what your mother did, I said. She committed a crime, Nathan. She forged my signature. She tried to destroy my career, and I can't just pretend that didn't happen. I know, he said, his voice heavy with resignation. I know, I'll talk to her. I'll make her understand that what she did was wrong. I shook my head slowly. Talking to her isn't going to fix this. She needs to face consequences. Real consequences? What kind of consequences? I don't know yet, I admitted. But I'm not going to let this slide. I'm not going to be the one who just forgives and forgets because she's your mother. There has to be a line, Nathan. And she crossed it. Nathan looked like he wanted to argue, but something in my expression must have convinced him otherwise. He nodded slowly. Okay, I understand. We'll figure this out together. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But as I looked at the man I'd married, I couldn't help wondering whether he was capable of standing up to his mother when it really mattered. He'd been avoiding confrontation with her for his entire adult life. Why would now be any different? The next few days were a blur of emails, phone calls, and anxious waiting. The publishing house's legal team moved quickly, examining the cancellation request and confirming that the signature was indeed a forgery. They sent me a new offer letter, this time with an extra clause protecting against unauthorized withdrawals. I should have been ecstatic. But Helen was still out there, still unchecked, still certain that she'd done nothing wrong. And I was absolutely certain that this wasn't over. Then the email arrived. Helen had sent it to Nathan, copying his entire family, and for a brief moment, I thought she might be apologizing. Maybe she'd realized the severity of what she'd done. Maybe she'd had a moment of clarity. I clicked it open with trembling fingers, and my blood ran cold. The subject line read, "Setting the record straight." The body was a masterclass in manipulation. Helen described how she'd discovered I was being pressured by the publishing house into signing a contract I didn't understand. She claimed she'd only wanted to protect me, to give me time to think about whether I was making the right decision. She framed herself as the concerned mother-in-law, worried about my well-being, not the woman who'd committed fraud. But the worst part was the ending, the line that made me realize just how deeply Helen despised me, how far she was willing to go to destroy my marriage and my future. She wrote, "I know Allison will be angry when she reads this, but as Nathan's mother, it's my responsibility to protect him from people who would take advantage of his success. And I hope one day Allison will thank me for showing her what's really important in life." I read that line 3 times, each reading more infuriating than the last. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't even slightly remorseful. She genuinely believed she'd done the right thing, that she had every right to insert herself into my career, my decisions, my marriage. Nathan came home from work to find me sitting on the couch, the email open on my laptop, my eyes red from crying. "Allison, what happened?" "Read it," I said, pointing at the screen. He read it in silence, his face growing more rigid with each paragraph. When he finished, he closed the laptop and set it aside. "I'm going to call her," he said quietly. "Right now." "For what purpose?" I asked, my voice hollow. "To let her explain how she was actually helping me? To give her another chance to manipulate you?" "No," he said, and for the first time I heard something different in his voice, something resolute. "I'm going to tell her that she's no longer welcome in our home, and that if she ever tries to interfere in our lives again, we're going to the police." I stared at him, searching for the hesitation, the uncertainty I'd come to expect when the topic of his mother arose. It wasn't there. He looked like a man who'd finally made a decision, finally committed to a course of action. "Nathan, are you sure?" I asked, hardly daring to believe it. "She's your mother. She's a woman who tried to destroy my wife's career," he said. "That's not what a mother does. That's what an enemy does. And I won't let her do it again." He made the call right there, sitting beside me on the couch, his hand clasped in mine. I listened as he spoke to her, his voice calm and controlled, delivering the words like a verdict. "Mom, I read your email, and I need you to understand something. What you did was not okay. It was illegal. It was cruel. And it's made me realize that I've been enabling your behavior for way too long. That stops now. You are not welcome in our home. And if you ever try to interfere in Allison's career or our marriage, again, we will press charges." I couldn't hear Helen's response, but I could imagine her outrage, her wounded denials, her accusations of ingratitude. Nathan listened for a long moment, then spoke again. "This isn't a negotiation, Mom. It's a boundary. If you want to be part of our lives in the future, you'll respect it. If not, then that's your choice." He hung up. And for the first time since the cancellation notice had appeared in my inbox, I felt like I could breathe again. The silence that followed Nathan's phone call was deafening. He sat beside me on the couch, his hand still gripping mine, his knuckles white with tension. I could feel the rapid pulse in his wrist, the shallow rhythm of his breathing. He'd just done something monumental, something I wasn't sure he was capable of until that very moment. I turned to look at him, really look at him. His jaw was clenched, his eyes fixed on some distant point across the room. He looked like a man who'd just run a marathon and wasn't sure whether to collapse or keep going. "Are you okay?" I asked softly. He let out a shaky breath. "I don't know. I think so. I feel like I just cut off my own arm, but I also feel like I finally did the right thing." I squeezed his hand. "You did do the right thing. That took so much courage, Nathan. I'm so proud of you." He turned to face me, his eyes glistening. "I should have done it years ago. I should have set boundaries the first time she criticized you. The first time she showed up unannounced, the first time she made you feel like you weren't good enough. I kept making excuses because she's my mother, because she raised me alone after my dad died, because I felt like I owed her something. But I don't owe her my marriage. I don't owe her your happiness." I leaned into him, resting my head on his shoulder. We sat like that for a long time, neither of us speaking, just holding on to each other in the quiet of our living room. The weight of everything that had happened pressed down on us, but for the first time it didn't feel unbearable. It felt like we were facing it together. The next few days were strangely peaceful. Nathan's phone buzzed constantly with calls and texts from his mother, but he ignored every single one. He showed me his screen, a long list of missed calls and increasingly desperate messages, and then he deleted them without reading them. "I need space," he said. "I need to think about what kind of relationship I actually want with her, if any. And I can't do that while she's flooding my phone with guilt trips and excuses." I supported his decision completely, but I couldn't help feeling a low thrum of anxiety. Helen wasn't the type to accept defeat quietly. She'd been challenged, and she wouldn't let that stand. I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my bones that she was planning something. The first sign came 3 days later. I was checking my email when I noticed a message from my editor at the publishing house. My heart leaped, thinking it might be good news about the project. Instead, the subject line made my stomach drop. "Concern regarding your author profile." I opened it with trembling fingers. The message was brief but devastating. Helen had contacted the publishing house directly, pretending to be a concerned family member, and claimed that I'd been struggling with mental health issues that made me unreliable and unstable. She'd suggested that the publishing house reconsider their offer, not out of malice, but out of concern for my well-being. I stared at the screen, my vision swimming with rage. She'd tried to sabotage my career through the legal department. When that failed, she'd attempted to undermine my credibility through gossip and lies. She wasn't just attacking my professional life anymore. She was attacking my character, my reputation, my fundamental competence as an adult. I called Rebecca immediately. She answered with a concerned greeting, and I launched into an explanation before she could say another word. "Rebecca, I am so sorry. The woman who contacted you is my mother-in-law. She's been trying to destroy my career ever since she found out about this opportunity. She forged my signature on a cancellation notice, and now she's spreading lies about my mental health." I don't know what to say. I'm mortified. Rebecca's voice was calm but firm. "Allison, take a breath. We've already handled this." When we received that email, our legal team flagged it immediately. The claims were unsubstantiated, and we have no intention of acting on them. We know who we're working with, and we trust you completely. I sagged with relief. "Thank you. I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. However," Rebecca continued, and my heart clenched again, "this is becoming a pattern. If your mother-in-law continues to interfere, it could create complications. We need to be proactive about protecting our working relationship. What do you suggest?" "I suggest you consider legal action," she said. "This isn't just a family dispute anymore. This is harassment and, in some cases, fraud. If you file a police report, we can use that to demonstrate that you're not complicit in any of this. It will protect you, and it will protect us." I ended the call with my mind racing. Legal action, police reports. This was moving into territory I'd never imagined I'd have to navigate. But Rebecca was right. Helen wasn't going to stop. Every time we blocked one avenue, she found another. The only way to make it stop was to make it impossible for her to continue. I found Nathan in the kitchen, making coffee with the mechanical efficiency of someone whose mind was elsewhere. He looked up when I entered, his expression immediately shifting to concern. "What happened?" "You look pale." I told him everything. The email, the false claims about my mental health, Rebecca's suggestion about legal action. Nathan listened without interrupting, his face growing grimmer with each sentence. When I finished, he set down his coffee mug and wrapped his arms around me. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry she's doing this to you. It's not your fault," I said into his chest. "It is, though." "Not directly. But I should have stopped her years ago. I should have seen what she was capable of. I kept giving her the benefit of the doubt because she was my mother, and because I didn't want to believe she could be this cruel. But I was wrong. She's been showing me who she is for years, and I just refused to see it." He pulled back, holding me at arm's length. "I think we need to do what Rebecca suggested. I think we need to file a police report." I searched his eyes for hesitation, for the familiar reluctance that had characterized his relationship with his mother for so long. It wasn't there. He looked resolute, determined, absolutely certain of his decision. "Nathan, are you sure? This could really damage your relationship with her. Probably permanently." "She damaged it," he said. "She did that, not us. And honestly, I'm not sure there's a relationship left to salvage. I don't know who she is anymore. Or maybe I do, and I'm just finally admitting it to myself." We went to the police station together that afternoon. The officer who took our report was professional and sympathetic, but I could tell she'd heard similar stories before. Family disputes, boundary violations, the slow unraveling of relationships poisoned by control and manipulation. "Do you want to press charges?" she asked. "Based on what you've described, we have grounds for fraud and harassment." I looked at Nathan. He nodded almost imperceptibly. "Yes," I said. "We want to press charges." The process was daunting. We had to provide documentation of everything: the forged cancellation notice, the emails from Helen's family account, the messages she'd sent to the publishing house. We spent hours compiling evidence, organizing it into a coherent timeline that demonstrated the pattern of behavior. When we left the station, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It should have been beautiful, but all I could feel was exhaustion and a strange, hollow emptiness. "What happens now?" I asked as we walked to the car. They'll investigate, Nathan said. They'll contact her, probably interview her, and then they'll decide whether to proceed with charges. Do you think she'll actually face consequences? Nathan was quiet for a moment. I don't know. But even if nothing comes of it, even if it just scares her enough to back off, that's something. She needs to know that there are consequences for her actions, that she can't just destroy people's lives without any pushback. The next week was a blur of waiting. Nathan's phone continued to buzz with calls from his mother, but he'd blocked her number now, a symbolic gesture that felt more significant than either of us wanted to admit. His extended family started reaching out, his aunts and cousins, all of them bewildered by the sudden silence. Nathan handled the calls with grace and honesty. He explained what his mother had done, the fraud, the harassment, the attempts to destroy my career. Some relatives were supportive, shocked by Helen's behavior, but understanding of our decision. Others were defensive, insisting that Helen must have had good intentions and that we were overreacting. It was during one of these calls that Nathan's voice finally broke. He was talking to his aunt, his mother's sister, when she suggested that maybe Helen was just trying to help and we should give her another chance. Aunt Marie, Nathan said, his voice strained. She committed fraud. She forged Allison's signature. She contacted Allison's employer and lied about her mental health. This isn't helping. This is destroying. And I can't keep pretending it isn't. I watched him from across the room, my heart aching for him. He was fighting a battle he never should have had to fight, defending our marriage against someone who was supposed to love and support us. When he hung up, he came to me and buried his face in my shoulder. I held him, feeling the tension in his muscles slowly ease. I'm sorry, he murmured. I'm sorry you have to deal with all of this. I'm sorry I didn't protect you sooner. You're protecting me now, I said. That's what matters. Then the call came. Helen had been contacted by the police. She was furious, outraged, and convinced that I was the villain in this story. She'd called Nathan's cousin, his aunt, everyone she could think of, painting herself as the victim of a vindictive daughter-in-law who was trying to destroy her family. But for the first time, her tactics weren't working. The people who mattered, Nathan's closest relatives, were starting to see through the manipulation. They remembered the small cruelties she'd inflicted over the years, the gossip, the controlling behavior, the attempts to insert herself into other people's marriages. One by one, they started reaching out to us, not to defend Helen, but to offer support. They'd seen her behavior for years, they admitted, but no one had ever had the courage to call it out. They were sorry they hadn't spoken up sooner. They were proud of us for setting boundaries. The validation was overwhelming. For so long, I'd felt like I was the only one who saw Helen clearly, the only one who recognized the manipulation beneath the mask of maternal concern. Now I knew I wasn't alone. Others had seen it too. They'd just been too afraid to say anything. And then, 2 weeks after we filed the police report, Helen showed up at our door. I was alone. Nathan was at work, and I was in the middle of a video call with Rebecca, discussing the final details of my book contract. I heard the doorbell ring, but I ignored it, assuming it was a delivery or a neighbor. Then came the knocking, persistent, insistent, and accompanied by Helen's voice calling through the door. Allison, I know you're in there. We need to talk right now. I ended the call with a hasty apology and crept to the front door, my heart pounding. Through the peephole, I could see her standing on the doorstep, her face flushed with righteous anger. She was wearing a tailored coat, her hair perfectly styled, her purse clutched in front of her like a shield. I had a choice. I could let her in and face her, or I could call Nathan and wait for him to handle it. But something in me rebelled against the idea of hiding. This was my home, my life, my marriage. I wasn't going to cower behind a locked door. I opened it. Helen's eyes widened slightly, as if she hadn't expected me to actually answer. Then her expression hardened. We need to talk, she repeated. Come in, I said, stepping aside. We can talk in the living room. She swept past me, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. I followed her into the living room, my heart racing, my mind scrambling for the right words. Helen turned to face me, her posture rigid with indignation. I can't believe you called the police on me. I can't believe you've turned my own son against me. What kind of person does that? A person who was the victim of fraud and harassment, I said evenly. A person whose career was almost destroyed by someone who was supposed to be family. I was trying to help you, Helen snapped. You don't understand. You're too young, too naive. You don't see how these people were taking advantage of you. I was protecting you. I was protecting Nathan. By forging my signature? By lying about my mental health? That's not protection, Helen. That's sabotage. She took a step closer, her eyes blazing. I did what I had to do. Nathan is my son. I raised him alone. I sacrificed everything for him, and I won't let some woman come in and destroy everything I've built for him. I'm not destroying anything, I said, my voice shaking despite my best efforts. I love Nathan. I support him. I've never tried to take him away from you, but you've been trying to push me away from the very beginning. You've never accepted me, never respected me, never even tried to get to know me. You just decided I wasn't good enough. Helen's mouth twisted. Because you're not. You're not what he deserves. You're a writer with a hobby. A woman who can't even manage a household properly. Nathan should be with someone who can actually take care of him. Someone like who? I interrupted. Someone you choose? Someone you can control? Her face went white, then red, then white again. For a moment, I thought she was going to scream. Instead, she took a step back, her composure slipping back into place like a mask. You will not speak to me that way in my son's house, she said coldly. Actually, I said, this is my house too, and I'll speak however I need to speak. You came here looking for a confrontation, but I'm not going to give you one. I'm going to tell you the same thing Nathan told you on the phone. You are not welcome here, not until you take responsibility for what you did, not until you apologize, and not until you get help. Helen stared at me, her expression a mixture of fury and disbelief. You're going to stand there and lecture me? In my own son's house? I'm going to stand here and set a boundary, I said. This is my home, this is my marriage, and you don't get to destroy it just because you can't accept that your son is an adult who made his own choices. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. I could see Helen's mind working, searching for the right angle, the right manipulation, the right weapon to use against me. You think you've won, she finally said. You think you've taken my son away from me, but you haven't. He'll come back to me. He always does. Maybe he will, I said. But if he does, it won't be because of anything you've done. It'll be because I gave him the freedom to choose. Something flickered across Helen's face. Something I couldn't quite identify. It might have been confusion, it might have been doubt, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by that familiar mask of cold contempt. You're making a mistake, she said. You're going to regret this. And then she walked out, her heels clicking on the floor, the door slamming behind her. I stood in the living room, my legs shaking, my heart racing. I'd just confronted my mother-in-law. I'd stood my ground. I'd set boundaries that I should have set years ago, and I'd survived. When Nathan came home, I told him everything. He listened without interrupting, his face unreadable. When I finished, he pulled me into his arms and held me tight. I'm so proud of you, he said. You were so brave. I was terrified, I admitted. Of course you were. That's what makes it bravery. Being terrified and doing it anyway. We decided together that we needed to move. Not to run away, not to hide, but to create a new space that was entirely ours. A home that Helen had never touched, never invaded, never poisoned with her presence. It was a fresh start, a clean slate, a chance to build something new without the weight of the past dragging us down. The move took months. We found a beautiful house in a different neighborhood, one Helen didn't know, one we could fill with our own memories. We packed up our lives, sorted through the years of accumulated stuff, and created a home that felt like ours alone. And in the midst of all that chaos, my book was published. It wasn't a massive bestseller, not by any means, but it found its readers. Children and parents wrote to me, telling me how much the stories meant to them, how the characters had helped them through difficult times. I'd done it. Despite everything Helen had thrown at me, despite the forgery and the lies and the attempts to destroy my career, I'd done it. I was a published author. I was living my dream, and Helen, she'd been charged with fraud. The case was ongoing, and I didn't know how it would end, but I did know that she couldn't hurt me anymore. Not because she'd changed, but because I'd changed. I'd stopped letting her define my worth, stopped letting her control my emotions, stopped letting her presence poison my life. It was a journey I never should have had to take. It was a battle I never should have had to fight. But I'd come out the other side stronger, wiser, and more certain of my own value than I'd ever been before. And the most remarkable thing, Nathan was right beside me the entire time. He'd found his own strength, his own voice, his own ability to set boundaries and protect what mattered. Together, we'd weathered the storm. Looking back now, I realized that Helen wasn't the villain I'd made her out to be. She was a deeply flawed woman who'd made terrible choices, yes, but she was also a mirror, reflecting back the parts of myself I'd been too afraid to confront, the parts that needed to be stronger, braver, more unapologetically myself. In the end, she didn't destroy us. She pushed us to become the people we needed to be. And for that, I suppose I should thank her, but I won't. I'll just keep living my life, building my career, loving my husband, and setting boundaries that protect everything I've worked so hard to create.